Welcome to part 13 of our Clone Wars rewrite. We are currently rewriting the character of Ahsoka Tano, and in this video we'll be focusing on Season 2, Episode 5, Landing at Point Rain, where we'll have Ahsoka learn not to glory in destruction. Thanks for joining us.
According to the argument against Ahsoka in the middle of an active war zone worries that Obi-Wan could be injured or worse, and it is heavily implied that she wants Anakin to drop what they are doing to go find Kenobi. So much so that he has to tell her to get her head back in the game because the only way to help Kenobi is to successfully complete their part of the mission. When they run into a heavily armed fortress wall, Ahsoka, while clones are being slaughtered around them, cheerfully disparages Anakin, saying, "Well, this is another fine mess you've gotten us into." After Anakin tries to defend himself, she continues to sarcastically mouth off at him until he barks an order at her to get ready to continue with the mission. And some claim this is banter, but we can show that this is not, because there are standards for banter. It's not banter. Believe in yourself, or no one else will. I don't think Ahsoka has a problem with this at all.
No, not at all. How is this even relevant to the episode?
Well, it's probably relevant to Anakin in some way, I guess, but I don't know. And yeah, Ahsoka believes so strongly in herself that she believes in literally nobody else. So it's great!
I cannot believe we're back here again.
It is unfortunate. The resistance from the native Geonosians was stronger than we anticipated.
The same can be said for their loyalty to Count Dooku.
A fact that is often overlooked.
You're late. Sorry, Master. Ahsoka and I were busy routing the Seppies near Doran.
My squadron alone had 55 kills.
Yeah, but mine had 76.
Show off.
Well, I'm glad you two are enjoying yourselves.
I hate this dynamic so much. They're literally making a game out of it. It's not a game!
Well, see, the thing is that Legolas and Gimli do this in the Two Towers, and I love it. It's great.
But there's a difference between the way they frame Legolas and Gimli doing it and the way they frame Anakin and Ahsoka doing it. Legolas and Gimli did it as a way to kind of lift each other's spirits in the face of absolute horror, while these two are literally just belittling war and how awful it is.
Yeah, no, it really comes down to how the writer frames it. And yeah, in this sense, because you already have the problem of Ahsoka being a child soldier, and then, yeah, you're making war look like a fun game that a child is partaking in. And it's like, no, you're dealing with a child, okay? If this was, Anakin and Obi-Wan, I think in a way it would still not work because of the Jedi code. But at least, it's two adults. But yeah, no, because that's another reason that it doesn't work is the Jedi code. You're glorifying in death. How is this the Jedi way?
And not to mention, in this episode, they're not killing droids. They're killing actual living beings.
Yeah, and I mean, in Lord of the Rings, they're killing actual living beings too, but Tolkien does a good job, or at least, I have to be honest, I've only ever watched the movies, so in that sense, Peter Jackson does a kind of a good job of making the enemy more of an entity than individuals, the way that the clones were in the original Star Wars trilogy. For the most part, they just all look the same. And it's more about the threat they pose as an entity, as an army, rather than these are individuals with names and faces and families and, But as soon as they humanized the clones, then it gets you thinking about every other army, right? Like, yeah, you're going up against the Geonosians, and there's this part of you that's kind of like, well, they're probably just like the clones. They're people with feelings and friends. And so you can no longer just be like, oh yeah, no, I totally root for them killing because they're doing it to survive, and this other side of the fence is just pure evil. Again, Tolkien/Jackson, they did a really good job of like, it's the army of orcs, urukai, whatever. They are just a tool of an enemy that represents just pure evil. And so it works, whereas Star Wars kind of has that element of, and this is where TCW fails again, right? Like we've already mentioned this, that they try to have this like nuance, like, no, there is gray, there is no pure evil. And then on the other hand, they're like, no, pure evil, just don't even think about them. Let's cheer them dying. And it's like, okay, you can't have it both ways.
And in regards to the Geonosians, Filoni himself has actually humanized them. Because in Rebels, spoilers for Rebels, you learn that the Geonosians were wiped out by the Empire, and basically your main characters come across a Geonosian who's like the last of his kind, and he's trying to preserve this egg as a way to stop his entire race from ending with him.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. So, like, yeah, you can't say, well, nobody cares about the Geonosians or the Geonosians aren't humanized, because they are, and Filoni himself did it.
And I mean, it's also that, like, I know Tolkien is very deep in his world building, so there's probably characters that you see in the movies in The Lord of the Rings that we don't find out their name, but probably in the books they are named. But if you just take the movies into account, then yeah, we don't know the names of any of these urukai. Whereas this episode opens with you naming the leader, right? So it's kind of like already like, okay, these people have names. They're people. There's a comic I read called Order of the Stick. It's comedy, so that they have this running joke in there that if you are a character with a name, you won't die. So there's this one side character who keeps trying to like say his name, but he always gets like cut off. And he's like, no, I need to say my name, otherwise I'm disposable.
But I was going to say, there is such a tonal whiplash here. Because you see Obi-Wan and the other guy talking, and like they're very somber, and they're taking the situation seriously. And then Ahsoka and Anakin walk in, they're like, oh no, this is just a fun game!
Yeah, that doesn't help things either. And I think what they're trying to go for is that Legolas and Gimli thing, but you can't really pull it off that way. I think in the books, Tolkien maybe explains a little better why they do it. But yeah, in the movies, you're right. I kind of get the impression that it's like they're literally facing an army that it's kind of like, okay, there's no hope. We're going to die fighting this battle. So, let's go out in a blaze of glory and get as many of them as we can. And that's kind of the impression I get, is that, like you said, it's about boosting each other's morale so that you don't just curl up in a corner and cry until someone stabs you in the throat. Whereas this is not framed in this way. This is, we have the upper hand, and we're going to glorify in every single one of our enemies that we snuff out.
It's really dark.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
And this, again, is why the way Ahsoka is framed in the show is hugely problematic.
Hey, it's just a little friendly competition, Master. Nothing to worry about.
What I worry about is the way this war seems to be drawing out, with no end in sight.
Obi-Wan says, oh, you know, the worst thing about this war is that it's dragging on so long. And I honestly thought that he was going to say something like, you know, the problem with this war is that it's bringing out the worst of us, right? As it drags on longer and longer. But no, it's just, oh, this war is taking too long. After he's been presented with, like, pure morbidity, which goes completely against the Jedi Code. And I'm like, okay, the writers missed a perfect opportunity there. But of course, they can't have anybody calling out bad behavior of their beloved characters. Oh, yeah.
I think we should just cut out that whole stupid back and forth where they're like, I had 55 kills. Well, I had 76.
Because it doesn't work in our fixed version. But, you know, at the very least, even if they weren't going with our fixed version, have somebody call that out.
To ensure that Rise Again, Geonosis does not capture Paco, we must. Of course.
So here's something funny. Senator Palpatine is smiling at all the wrong moments because he's just so evil. But you can kind of forgive it because it's like, oh, he's this doting old man, so sweet and kind, and, you know, he's a politician, right? So they always have smiles pasted on their faces. But Ahsoka does the same thing. She smiles at all the wrong moments. And you're like, so is she secretly evil then too?
I think she is, quite honestly. It's like how everyone's theorized that Jar Jar was actually a Sith. I theorized that Ahsoka is secretly a Sith.
Not so secretly, but yes, I understand what you mean.
Their front lines are heavily fortified. Look at that giant wall with all the gun emplacements. That won't be easy to get past.
Don't worry, we're not going anywhere near that.
Come now. What happened to all the enthusiasm I saw earlier?
Don't worry about us. You just make sure you get yourself to that landing zone in one piece.
I would take out Obi-Wan's line of, oh, where's all that enthusiasm I saw earlier, since we took out Ahsoka and Anakin's stupid lines.
Yeah. And if you didn't have them, you know, being so cocky and disrespectful toward war earlier, then her attitude right now would make more sense. Again, it's this like whiplash with Ahsoka. Last time we shared, oh yeah, well my squad took out this many guys, blah blah blah. And now, oh no, that looks really dangerous. It's gonna be so difficult. And it's like,
it never stops. It never stops.
It's so bad that even a character in world says, ooh, you just changed on a dime. So the funny thing is that like they have Anakin being really like overconfident there. And again, this kind of goes to show that they don't have any of their characters kind of learning from previous mistakes, because they had an episode before already that dealt with overconfidence, and again, because they kind of aimed the quips at Anakin, that should have been his episode to learn that.
It was literally the second episode. Because Anakin was trying to make the run on the Malevolence and everyone else was getting killed. And yeah, I believe the quip also had something to do with overconfidence. And yeah, I think there was even another episode previously that dealt with overconfidence in Anakin's case. And just,
it's like they don't want to change their character so that they can continue to have these like same kind of formula stories. And it's like, I don't typically read anthologies, but I think the idea of them is pretty cool. It's just that when it comes to TCW, it feels like they kind of hid behind the anthology. It's like, oh, we can lower our standards because it's just a bunch of random stories that don't connect to one another. And so then we can do whatever we want. And it's like, okay, well, as soon as you have the same character carrying over from one episode to another, then you do have them connected. It's not like every single episode deals with a different character, in which case, yeah, you could do whatever you wanted. But you're dealing with the same characters, and you already admit that there is a chronological order to these episodes. They don't just happen in a vacuum and it's like, okay, you can put them wherever you want. But then they're like, oh, but it's totally cool that our characters stay the same throughout the entire thing. And this again is why they should have chosen characters that were not in the movies so that they could actually do something with them. Because yeah, they can't really have Anakin grow over the series and then he's in a completely different place in the third movie. So it's like, don't use characters confined by their stories. There's so many characters that they could have made this series about.
Good thing those bugs can't aim.
That's still like hilarious in an awful way.
It's one of those, the pot calling the kettle. Because it's a clone saying, oh, it's a good thing they can't aim. And then, yeah, it kind of adds to the irony by then having them explode, which is awful. But it makes you wonder, okay, is that supposed to be a joke, right? Because that almost feels like a punchline. The guy says, oh, they can't aim, and then he gets shot. So is that supposed to be showing you never know which bullet has your name on it? Or is that supposed to be showing, oh, see, he said they can't aim, and then they're dead?
I think it does fall into the category of a dark humor joke.
And again, it's one of those things that it's like, if the show handled the topic of war better, I wouldn't have a problem with that scene, because yeah, you could take it either way. Either it's a dark humor joke, or it's kind of like this sad truth. You think you're okay because it always happens to somebody else, and then suddenly you're the somebody else. But because they handle the topic so poorly, I don't know how to take it, and I don't really appreciate it.
Great. The one time I actually asked Obi-Wan for help is nowhere to be found.
Well, what if something happened to General Kenobi? He could be injured.
No time for that kind of talk. We need to
I
mobilize
feel like
now.
they're spitting on Anakin and propping up Ahsoka again here. Because Anakin is being really callous toward the news that Obi-Wan got shot down. And he's like, oh, he's not here to help me. Ugh. And then Ahsoka's like, oh, but he could be injured. Okay, what? It should be like the other way around. Like, not to the point where Anakin's like, we have to drop everything and go see if he's all right. But he should be showing like some concern. I would have Anakin just kind of look down and be like, I guess we're on our own then. To fix Ahsoka's line, I would just have her look concerned, but not say anything, and then Anakin kind of looks over at her and he's like, hey, you gotta keep your head in the game.
Well, this is another fine mess you've gotten us into.
What? Hey, it's not my fault. You were supposed to study the holomath.
I did! Remember when I reminded you about the giant wall and you said, don't worry, Smith, we won't be anywhere near that.
Just get ready to climb.
And she actually rolls her eyes at him.
Oh, yes. It's just great. The level of complete disregard for what's going on around them and disrespect toward Anakin again. Off the top of my head, how many moments of genuine respect have we seen Ahsoka give Anakin? And we're into season 2 now.
It's never genuine respect. It's always just lip service.
Yeah. See, that's the problem, because even if the writers were going for genuine respect, that's not the way it comes across because of all the moments of blatant disrespect preceding and following. So yeah, it's just absolute terrible attitude. And there's nothing bantery about it. because basically in the argument against Ahsoka, we kind of said, you know, for banter to be banter, both parties have to be involved in it in a light heart. Like the scene at the beginning of this episode, even though it was horribly done, that was an example of banter when she's like, oh, you know, my troop got this many. And he's like, oh, well, my troop got that many. And I'll show off. Right? Like, that's banter. This is very clearly not banter because Anakin is stressed and upset and Ahsoka is just like, oh, this is all your fault. And like, you know, you screwed up, but I did what I was supposed to do. And like, that's not banter. Not even remotely banter. And they're in the middle of a war zone. So this is, you know, again, what did he try to teach her in Storm Over Ryloth? You listen and obey your superiors. And she's not listening. And she, you know, she's mouthing off. And she doesn't learn. She doesn't learn from Anakin.
So would we take out that dialogue or would we turn it into actual banter?
Yeah, I don't think I would want a moment of banter here. It's hard to say because like banter does help. I mean, that's what Legolas and Gimli were doing, right? So it's not like, oh, you can never have banter in a serious situation. So would we want this to come off as a moment of banter or would we want this to be serious?
I'd rather make it a serious moment.
Okay.
Because like this stupid scene is literally preceded by a handful of clones dropping dead.
And I will say this about the Lord of the Rings movie. Again, I haven't read the books, but you can hear Legolas and Gimli shouting out numbers in the thick of the battle when it's just starting. And when the wall gets blasted open and there's already been people around them dying, but then it's like the battle turns and just becomes even worse of a situation. And then you don't hear them counting anymore. It's not until they've won and everything is calm again that Legolas is like, oh yeah, this was my total, and then Gimli's like, oh, I beat you by 1, right? So yeah, there is something to be said that if morale drops despite the attempt at banter, then you can't bring it back in the middle of a really serious moment. Because like right here, yeah, things are looking down. Their plan has fallen apart. So you're right that this should probably be a moment of seriousness rather than banter. So if we were being serious, then I would probably have Anakin be the one to be like, oh crap, this is that barrier that we weren't supposed to be anywhere near. And Ahsoka could maybe make a comment like, you know, there's no way we could have known that they were this prepared for us coming. And then Anakin is like, okay, how are we gonna get out of this? Ahsoka's like, you know, well, when I looked at the holographs, like you told me this is what I saw. And so then Anakin's like, okay, then, you know, get prepared to climb, right? So they're working together rather than fighting each other.
How many droids have you shut down so far?
25.
You're behind.
Yeah, so with that, I don't think, given what we said earlier, that would be a good spot for it. I think it would be better if it was like after the wall came down because they just achieved a victory then. But the other thing is that, yeah, as we already pointed out, it's like they're fighting droids here at the wall, but they've also been fighting, you know, the Geonosians as well. So it's like, okay, are you only counting droids or are you counting Geonosians too? I mean, like he specifies droid there, but it's not like they've only been fighting droids. Didn't Anakin say, how many droids have you shot down?
Yeah, he did.
Which is kind of weird because they don't shoot. They stab and slice and parry.
Well, they were deflecting blaster bolts, so I mean, I guess you could say they were technically?
No, you can't say they were technically shooting. It makes more sense to say take. That literally just popped into my head. I was like, wait a minute.
Found one!
And again.
I would get rid of the close-up on her face after the droideka pops up. Like, I would either show her just jumping away or moving to attack it or whatever.
Remember, this is after the Blue Shadow virus arc.
Exactly.
She's perfectly capable of taking out a droideka, especially because she sees it coming. She sees it has no shields up, and while it is completely defenseless, she's like, oh no! And then Anakin has to come and rescue her, and she like jumps over him and then like covers his back. It doesn't make any freaking sense. She should see it coming and then slice it in half as it pops out of the hole.
Yeah.
End of story. So if you didn't want that, then I would have it's already shielded.
Well, she can still get it with its shields up. She just has to stick her hand through the force field and stab it.
Yeah, like she did in the Blue Shadow virus. So either which way, yeah, I think they wanted to have the moment of like Rex coming up behind the other ones. I mean, you could still have that. You know, Ahsoka takes out this one, and then Anakin is deflecting the blaster shots of the other one because it came up too fast for him to cut it in half or whatever. He wasn't close enough. And then, yeah, Rex comes up behind the other one and shoots it in the head through the shield.
Up and away!
I don't think I would have her up and away remark.
Yeah.
At most, I would have her say, you know, steady yourself or something more reassuring rather than, hey, we're just gonna throw you over the wall.
Get all in on! The reinforcements have arrived!
Man, oh man. That scene is done really well. Without Obi-Wan saying a word, you can see that he's like, this is the end, but I'm gonna go down fighting. And then, yeah, that moment of just pure relief when the reinforcements arrive. I wish there were more moments like that, where the body language and expression just speaks for itself, and you don't have to say anything.
Well, what happened to you?
I might ask you the same question.
So that moment there when Anakin and Obi-Wan, that was a little bit of banter, but again, it's after a moment of like a small victory. Things are still tough, but they've gotten a step up. Like that, those are good places to put banter, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Notice how Anakin's lightsaber never stops moving, and Ahsoka's not moving her lightsaber at all?
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, how come she isn't having to deflect anything right now?
It doesn't make sense.
No.
Fix that. Oh, now all of a sudden she starts doing stuff.
Droid poppers, ready!
Oh look, the droid poppers suddenly exist again. Such an overpowered weapon, which is why they almost never use it. Don't make overpowered weapons.
Looks like it's working.
It won't last long.
So that moment where she says, looks like it's working, and then he says it won't last long, that's kind of a way of providing exposition. Is it really necessary, though? I guess if you didn't say that, and then in the next shot the things were firing again, then it's like, well, wait, I thought they just stunned those things. So I think I would change it, though, because Ahsoka should probably know that they only last temporarily. So if instead you had it that she's, instead of like, it looks like it's working, you just say, you know, oh, we got him, or something like that. And he's like, on his comm or whatever, he's like, you know, bring in the tanks, well, you know, before the stun wears off, or something like that.
So, Master, what was your total?
Not now, Ahsoka.
Come on. Are you afraid you lost this time?
Fine. 55. That's my count. And you?
60. Looks like I won.
Yeah. But I called in the airstrike. Tie.
You're impossible.
I'll never understand how you can simplify these battles into some kind of game.
Same!
65, Skywalker.
Sorry?
My total, 65. So what do I win?
My everlasting respect, Master Mundi.
Oh,
That is a gift Anakin rarely bestows.
Despite how much I love that moment, since we
Yeah.
didn't have that whole setup in the beginning, I would just cut out the whole competition entirely. So you just see Anakin helping Kenobi onto the ship.
Yeah. I would have Ahsoka maybe come and I mean, it doesn't make sense for her to ask, "Are you okay?" Because she already knows he's not. But
She could wish him a safe journey.
yeah, there you go. Wish him a safe journey. It's one of those things that I'm kind of torn because I like when Master Mundi kind of reveals that he was playing the game too. It's a fun moment. But again, this goes back to the writers don't really handle topics like these properly because they have Obi-Wan there being the single voice saying this is war, this isn't a game. But then you have another council member, Master Jedi person being like, "Oh yeah, I was participating in the game too." So then it totally undermines Obi-Wan, who is kind of in the right here. This isn't a game. This is war.
Yeah.
And again, we've already kind of said that, like, when it was Legolas and Gimli, they weren't trying to turn it into a game. It was to lift each other's morale. And again, we know that that's what they were trying to do here in this episode, but it just doesn't work the same. What if you had it that instead of Anakin and Ahsoka being the ones kind of playing the game, that it was maybe two of the clones, like some of the higher up clones with like a name, and they get Ahsoka kind of pulled into it at the beginning of the episode because they're talking about, their scores from the previous battle, and she's like, "Hey, what are you guys talking about?" And they're like, "Oh, we keep score of how many tinnies we take down." And so she's okay, right? And again, because it's not lives, it's just droids, then she's like, "Oh yeah, no, this is fine." And then maybe have it that at the end of the episode, you have one of the clones be like, "Hey, Ahsoka, what was your final tally?" And she's like, "Oh, it was this," and like blah blah blah. But then maybe Obi-Wan kind of overhears that, and then he makes his comment like, "This is not a game. This is war." And specifically to Ahsoka, he's like, it's not the Jedi way to glory in destruction. And so then maybe that's kind of the lesson she learns, because they never come back to this game ever again. And so if you were going to have it in there, that would be a good way to have it, and that would be why it doesn't come up again, is because Ahsoka kind of learns, no, even though it's just droids, you're not taking lives, it's still, at least the way the doing it, which is kind of the way it was being done in this episode anyways, it was kind of more glorying in the destruction.
Okay. That's an interesting idea.
So that was episode 5, Landing at Point Rain, where we had Ahsoka learn not to glory in destruction. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave us a like, comment below with your thoughts, subscribe if you're interested in catching more of our future content, share this around with your friends, and please consider becoming a Patreon to help support the channel. Next up, we're doing Season 2, Episode 6, Weapons Factory, so be sure to join us for that. See you around.
We'll be doing Weapons Factory.
Yes! There's a Lord mentioned we get to meet Varys for the first time.
And thankfully we won't have to ruin her character because we have other plans. Ha ha ha. And also we can get back to addressing lore stars how Filoni supposedly fixed Ahsoka in 4 episodes.
Spoiler alert, he didn't.
Not at all. Not even a teeny tiny little tad.
Yeah, as we've already pointed out in this episode, again, you have Ahsoka ignoring the lesson that she was supposed to learn in Storm over Ryloth. And then, again, should have learned in Holocron Heist. And then she's still behaving the exact same way in Landing at Point Right. So it's like, I'm sorry, but just because you have a character go through something doesn't mean that you've fixed that character. Because if the character doesn't come away from that changed at all, then you've done nothing. But Lore Star completely ignores that. And it's just really, really frustrating. Willfully blind.
Mm-hmm.
The argument is... It's great. Great. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
So that was episode 5, Landing at...
I don't know that place. How can you land at such a place?
You know what? Shush! I have to record.